Hey fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. Today I have a distinguished guest in Sarah Koudouzian. Really keen to talk about tennis because she is a former tennis player that's now getting back into the game. She's also a best-selling author and has a fitness business, so an entrepreneur as well. So there's lots of things to unpack and talk about here. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. Talk about getting back into tennis. Let's start there. Like, how does it feel now after so long to be back and playing? You play almost every day, right?
Almost every day, I'm on the court for like 2 hours. The other day, we almost made it to 3 hours, and we were going to keep going, but we had happy hour to get to, so it was either tequila or tennis. So we opted for tequila.
That's a good choice, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, which back then, obviously, it would have been tennis. I think it's just the one thing that I continuously say is that the sport that used to give me anxiety has now become my outlet to it. And now I get onto the court just with a different mindset, which I feel has made me a better player now than back when I was ranked.
Yeah, here we go. She has a fire alarm situation, so don't be
I am
alarmed.
so sorry. I This was supposed to stop 30 minutes ago. So
That's just fun. I might edit it out, but I think it's fun that it's there as well.
I just forewarn them, if you have sensitive ears, I can only imagine. But anyway, so I think just coming in as a former player with so much experience, and growing up back when mental health was not a huge thing in tennis. And the one thing I always say when I'm talking to different athletes and different professional athletes, I was like, tennis is the only sport you are on that court by yourself. Like, even with golf, you have your caddy, you have your team. But if you even so much look at your coach and your coach is doing some sort of signal, you are fined. You can't even look. So you have to be hyper focused. And people will always say, how do you get by that, or how do you determine how to play each player? And I'm like, I'm not playing the player, I'm playing the ball. And that's the mindset that I have completely switched to, because I feel, for me, when I take out the other player, I make it about me, and it's more about me and my choices I have to make, because I'm a very offensive, aggressive player, and at any time I'm inside that baseline swinging volleys and things like that. But if I let my head get into it where I'm like, oh, it's the other player, then I'm going to start playing more of a defense and playing more so of how the other player is doing. So I think there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, no, and you train at some really top academies like Bollettieri, and you were one of the top 50 players in the country. But then you had like an injury. What happened there? Like the career-ending injury?
I
Oh,
did. Here is a full blown. So I grew up again with predominantly my dad being my coach, which in a lot of cases it's not so much formal training there. And it was 7 days a week. It was the mindset of a very militant mindset of, you play through pain. Does not matter how tired you are, you don't get to say you're tired. Does not matter what hurts, you better play through it, because that's what's going to make you tougher and a better athlete. So I was playing through pain, and I just kept playing and playing, and I was noticing the pain. And I remember I was playing in Pasadena, California. It was one of the big tournaments back there, and I hit the forehand, and I remember this so vividly, and the racket went flying up in the air at contact, and I screamed, and I was like, I'm done. I'm done. So they took me to the hospital, and apparently I had broken broken bones. And I still
wow.
picked up my racket, by the way, and I tried to like continue, but I couldn't even hold it at that point anymore. So when they got into surgery, they had to do the surgery, and it just didn't heal properly at all. I mean, I don't know if just technology was way more different, or whatever it is, but I mean, the scar's there. And I don't know if you could see it, or if this grosses anybody out, but you could see right here. And I lost full blown range of motion. This
Wow.
feels like I'm doing a TikTok dance or something, but
Yeah, that's good too.
but just doing this, you could see the difference in range of motion. And again, it hit me just mentally and just trying to get back. I tried to do the rehab of getting it back, getting it stronger, but each time it just was not to that extent. And at that time, when I was top 50 in the country, I had scholarships to like every Pac 10 school, Ivy League schools. And at 16, when obviously that's the time they're starting to recruit and all of that kind of stuff, when they heard I'm injured, everything dropped. So I lost all my scholarships and I was homeschooled. So I didn't really have that education in the sense of to just use my grades to be able to get into college. I was relying on tennis if I was going to go, but I had made up my mind since I was a kid, I'm going to be professional. And it's Sarah, the tennis player, Sarah's going to be a pro. Sarah's training to go pro. And then so when I lost it, it really blindsided me because I think as a kid, you don't think about option B, it's option A, and that's it. And
Yeah,
especially with
exactly.
like having those pressures of, we have strict father, and my mom was just just an angel. My brothers and I would fight like who gets mom to take them to the tournament, and who's stuck with dad.
So
So
what happened after that? Like I mean, that's a completely life-changing situation. You're thinking only tennis, 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 tennis. This is my
yeah.
life. Whether that's good or not for a kid, you can argue about, and something I've talked about in other podcasts, how difficult it is to be in a parent and child like coaching relationship, and we can maybe get into that. But for you afterwards, like how did it feel, and how did you react to this new life you're suddenly in?
I I mean, at 16, first and foremost, you're truly figuring yourself out like no other. But I was a very isolated kid because, again, tennis being a complete individual sport, it's not like I did doubles to have at least a doubles partner to talk with. It was homeschooling, tennis, homeschooling, tennis. So the only way I identified myself with anything was with the sport. So once that was gone for me, it was life changing in the sense of I thought I lost myself completely as well. I was basically told by my dad, since he was pushing and sacrificing, but my mom obviously was there, but in his mindset was a little more different, and it was basically figure it out. You got to figure out how to get into college. You got to figure out how you're going to now pay for college. You're gonna figure it out. And so at 16, I had to figure it out. And so after surgery, after all the rehab, not fully being able to come back, constantly in pain, re-injuring myself, the same injury over and over, had to get a job, a part-time job. I had to figure it out. So I got a job and then started saving and started very early on to be very resourceful in the sense of who do I know in the tennis world that can help me come on to the school, probably walk on and see. Like, okay, I couldn't go pro anymore because it was different, but I grew up training against um, people older than me, boys, men. And so I was like, I got college. I'll be able to get college. Like it's a different world playing D1 tennis as opposed to playing pro. And so I walked on, contacted one of the people that I knew over at Cal State Northridge, and I walked onto the team. And that coach had been trying to recruit me since way younger days anyway. So he knew who I was. And, I walked onto the team, but unfortunately, that was one of my worst experiences of being on that team. I had an unfortunate experience in a situation, and I quit the team. So I quit tennis a second time in the sense of, well, this is not fun and this is worse than when I was playing junior tennis. And I said, now what am I going to do? And I ended up going into severe depression and anxiety and weight gain of like maybe a good 35 pounds, I want to say, which coming up as like a super fit athlete, like at an elite level, and then going into that emotional eating, emotional soda drinking, because I didn't have my first drink till I was 21, but having soda is a different kind of a drug. It is a drug. And um, I had to figure it out. I finally hit a rock bottom, and I said, this is not me. This is not who I am, and what do I have to do? So I switched my major in college, because I first went in. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I said, "Oh, I'm gonna be a tennis broadcaster. This is what I want to do." And then I said, I I need to figure out what happened to me. So I switched my major to kinesiology. And I said, if I can figure out what happened to me, I can help other athletes to not end up like me, make better choices, make better decisions. And I said, and that'll be me being able to give back and pay it forward so someone else doesn't end up in those hard routes that I ended up taking and having to go through. And I said, if someone can hear me out there, just even listening to this and say, hey, the importance of what you do off the court. And back then, again, like growing up, not with someone that was super trained in this kind of world. If I had trained differently, not overtrained, listened to my body, done the meditation, the journaling, the mental work that tennis consists of, I feel like I would have still been able to make it on tour. So I think that's why I made the choice that I made of studying kinesiology, and it was hard. I had to dissect a cat. It was brutal. That major was absolutely brutal.
I wouldn't be able to do that. I think that would be rough.
I put in my head, I said, because I cried when I first found out, and I tried to get out of it, and I'm very persuasive at times, and it didn't work. And they said, you don't do this, you fail the class. And so I had to go in there, and I was like, okay, tennis mindset, you have to switch it. What are you going to do? So I said, oh, this is a chicken. You are roasting a chicken. That's what this is. This is a chicken. This is not a cat. Not that it makes it any better, but it made it seem like, oh, I'm preparing a dinner. I could not eat chicken for an entire year because I associated it with that. Yeah, that was brutal.
Yeah, that sounds brutal. Like some degrees. Wow, it's tough. Getting back to your beginnings there, like you trained with Andre Agassi's father, Mike Agassi, and
Yeah.
what we know from Agassi's backstory is that like when he wrote Open and all that stuff, is that he was trained in a very specific way and not maybe the nicest way as for a kid to learn tennis. Like, I mean, there's more education around maybe how to train kids today, although some people still do it very strangely.
Yeah.
Was that where like were you always really pushed like by your father, and in this situation, like
Yeah.
how did you react to all that stuff?
I I learned to dissociate at a very early age, which obviously doing a lot of work in my adult years, I understand myself way more than I've ever understood myself. And so I understand what Andre went through in the sense of I had a similarity. And for me, it's again, what saved me was a disassociation. I think other studies will tell you otherwise in regards to doing something like that. But it taught me now to not take things personally, and I just at surface level and take what I need from it in order to be able to make myself a better player and do better. So for me, I understood that mindset and that mentality. I think it was different when I trained with him. And it was different for me because I was out there for a week. So obviously, my experience is going to be way different than what anyone goes through with their parent or what anyone goes through with a coach that's not their parent. And I I was just honored to be there because being a huge Andre fan, like the biggest, like I still am the biggest Andre fan, and being Middle Eastern and him being of half Armenian descent, like there was a lot of relatability because me growing up as a Middle Eastern athlete, Lebanese Armenian, I never saw other female athletes like me. Now we have on Shavor, so which is so great. And it's her saying the Yalla Habibi means like so much to me, because I was like, oh my god, like I wish I had her when when I was growing up and playing, because I it's the representation like that really does matter. And so it was, for me, I had a great experience with him. He's the reason I have straight teeth now, because and again, because I was used to that kind of upbringing. I remember vividly, I was smiling and he turned to my parents and said, she cannot hold trophies and smile with crooked teeth, get her braces.
Wow. It's old school.
Very open, yes. And in my mom's eyes, I was always the most beautiful thing on the planet for her. So she thought it was cute that I had crooked teeth. And, they had to explain, like, what are you going to do when she's older and she wants straight teeth? Like, you might as well do it now. And so I can thank him for braces.
Yeah, that's a good story actually. Well, that sometimes it's like tough love. Like someone means well, they just are very blunt and they just say it. And for some people, it's hard to deal with. And if you grow up like that, maybe you learn how to adjust to that kind of language.
Yeah, and I'm not excusing it whatsoever. Like, everyone's going to handle it differently. But for me, I've always had a different mindset for myself, in the sense of, I am I allowed to cuss? Am I allowed to say profanity? Is
Yeah, of
profanity?
course. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, right. Like, in the sense of, I don't give a fuck what anyone is saying. I know myself, and I'm whatever I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do it for me. And what you say is not gonna affect me, because of the fact of, I'm going to make my own pathway regardless. Like, I went through the darkness, and only for me to come out of it just knowing myself.
Yeah, so I mean, you seem to have gone through quite a lot and like built a really kind of a strong foundation. But obviously, these things also hurt you in adult life when you have to go through all that. Like, have you worked a lot on yourself in terms of therapy and stuff to be a stronger and now also entrepreneur and all that stuff you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the most beautiful thing about tennis, if you look at it from a philosophical point, it is the most related to the world than any other sport, in the sense of, if you want to take the entrepreneur route, you can look at tennis and see it be this, how can I say this? I'm trying to articulate it in the best way possible. But tennis, like, you have to figure it out. If you're down 5-0, you have to figure it out. If I have, if I'm pitching an idea and 10 doors have closed on me, I need to figure out 10 more for me to knock on. And I do give so much credit to the sport, in the sense of teaching me such valuable lessons, that I think that's why I'm so passionate about kids in general starting off with sports, whether you're doing it for fun or competition. There's so much behind it, like so many things you learn from some of the best coaches that are life lessons. And I remember one of the times, I think I was just not having it in practice, and then I had to go and play a tournament. And I get onto the court, and sometimes I would be checked out in the sense of, sometimes when you're an aggressive player and you're more so about hitting that flat ball and the sweet ball, sometimes you don't think, and you just, oh, there's the ball, and you want to just hit it, just how like a dog reacts to a squirrel. It's the same thing for me. And I remember being down 5-0, 30 love, and I came back and won the match. And everybody was like, what were you doing the first set? I was like, I don't know. The one thing that I do know is, it's not over till it's over. That match was not over. I've never been afraid of being down 5-0, being down a set. Things like that never bothered me. And I think that plays a huge part in my entrepreneurship. I mean, the amount of ideas that I've had that have just either been laughed at or said it's too soon or not, whatever, and then being able to do the things that I have done and am doing is all because I had that mentality instilled in me in tennis. Like, and no one's gonna tell me no. Like, You're going to tell me no, that's fine, but someone else is eventually going to say yes. And if they don't say yes, then I'm going to create my own way to do it. And that was actually the way that I got the book deal. I had no representation, didn't have an agent. I was writing to people every day. Hey, I have this idea. I'm pitching it. I'm going to figure it out. I just need a lawyer. I need a manager to help me read. Every single person, I'm not kidding you, turned me down. Every single, I had zero representation. I always wrote, and I would love to write. I've won a couple things in college, and I had this idea with a client that I was working with, and I was like, hey, let's partner up. I had the idea of doing this cookbook fitness book, and I was working with a client at the time, and I said, hey, I have this idea. You're seeing great results with me, and it was what I was doing at that time. And you're going to laugh, and everyone always laughs about this because they were like, where did your inspo come from for this? And I was in Las Vegas for the J-Lo closing show. At 50 years old, she was turning 50 because she's a Leo like me, and I love her work ethic, and she just, so many boundaries. She's just crushed, which is why I love her. And so I was at that show, and she's turning 50 like the next day or whatever day it was, and she's in heels like this big, doing acrobatic movements on the stage, and I am at awe, in absolute awe, and I am looking at her and I'm like, how and I said to myself, I will never ever ever say I'm too tired ever again. Like, I will never say that again. It's never it's never going to be an excuse. It's never going to be an option for me. And she was singing this one song, and I promise you, she made eye contact, so I feel like she gave me some of her like J-Lo powers. And then the next day, I was on a midnight flight, and I got onto a flight, got to LA on maybe 2 hours of sleep because I'd been sitting on this book idea, and I was like, what are you doing? And I didn't sleep. I was so inspired. I wrote the whole thing in 24 hours without sleeping, and I downloaded that app, Canva, because I was like, oh, I got to make a book now. I got to now pitch this the right way. I still have that pitch. Like, it is it is so embarrassing to look at, in the sense of like where my my visual quality was back then, but at the same time it's one of my proudest moments because I didn't know, and I figured it out. And I took my laptop with to my client's house with my with our training session. I said, now's your time, because I kept trying to get a meeting with her, trying to give her the pitch, and she kept like, she was so busy. And she's on a break, and I did this strategically because I had her doing like 10 interval sprints, and I was like, she's gonna sit down now. And I take out the laptop, and she's mid-breath like and I'm like, and she looked at it and her eyes opened up, and she was like, oh my god. And I was like, this is why I've been trying to meet with you. I want to do this with you. And right then and there, she wanted to buy the idea. And a week prior to that, I had listened to a podcast with Oprah on it. And Oprah said, if they want to buy your idea, you never sell and you ask for a percentage. And so I had that in my head, and I said, you're not buying this idea. We're going to partner. And then the rest was history. We got signed to Simon & Schuster, one of the biggest like publishing companies in the world. And like, for me to come in of this underdog, which is again relatable to me in the sense of I was always the underdog coming up, because when I was 12, my dad was having me play in the 16 and unders, because he was like, this is how you're going to get better. And so I was at 12, like this little tiny little thing, and coming in and ending up winning tournaments with that underdog mentality. And it was the same thing now. I had the underdog, like, who's this? Like, she's not the star, which I never try to be, nor did I think I was. I had an idea, and I knew how the game works. So that's how it happened. And we actually released during the pandemic. I didn't have a PR team. I till this day, I don't have any of that. I don't have management. I don't have any of that. And I had to Google my way through everything, Jonas. Like it was insane. Like I was, to me, again, it comes down to tennis. Because if you're having the craziest match and you just can't figure it out, you don't have a coach telling you what to do or how to fix it. You can't do that. So you have to figure it out. So I figured it out.
No, it's amazing your story, and I really I think people take inspiration from hearing that things are not like a perfect process. It's always like something that happens in the blink of an eye, or just like a quick lightning flash of inspiration, and you go for that meeting and you need to go for it. I think generally like the mindset of being like, okay, I'm not I'm going for this, I'm going to the trainer, and you just like you put your foot down and we're going to get it done, and that's the kind of thing that changes, and makes things happen. So I think it's pretty inspirational, and a great story, like a great backstory to the book.
Thank you.
And the book is about like I mean lifestyle and like nutrition, really, like, so you're really into food and cooking and recipes and stuff like that. Can you talk about your journey in that world?
Yeah, so I mean, growing up in a Middle Eastern household, the woman is usually the one that does all the cooking and things like that. And I always wanted to be in the kitchen with my mom, not so much because of those gender roles in the culture. I'm very rebellious in those kinds of things. Like I'm very very rebellious with that. I'm the polar opposite, but I would see my mom and she would create, like, I'm not even kidding you. If she told you to come for a light lunch or a light dinner, it was a gourmet setting on the table that took her just this was it. This was easy, and I would watch, and I loved it, and I would see people and how happy they would become eating her food, and a lot of people don't do that, and it's more of like, oh, what's in the fridge, quickly making a sandwich and whatever. But like this was an experience my mom would create, and I, as a kid, you're like a sponge, so you're absorbing these things, and I've always been the type of person that I love to make people happy and feed them. And my mom could be starving and tired and exhausted, but if she fed you, it fed her. And it does the same for me. And just learning from a lot of the stuff in the culture where, even if you're not hungry, you eat. And oh, if you're thin, why aren't you eating? Are you sick? So
Yeah, I recognize that.
yeah, it's a lot of that. Or if you're so full and they're telling you, no, no, you got to eat. And so, learning a lot through my experience in fitness and kinesiology and certifications for learning about nutrition. So, for me, when I would tell growing up to my family, telling them, "Oh, no, I got to eat healthy," and they're like, "Why? You're already thin." And I was like, I'm not eating healthy because of my weight. I'm eating healthy because I want my insides to feel good. So they'd be like, oh, what? You're going to have boiled chicken? And I said, no, I can have this, and that. So I figured it's time for me to go into that route now, in the sense of I want to give healthy eating a good name. It doesn't have to be bland or boring. I create some of the most flavorful meals, and just knowing what to put and how to set a table to make it just as visually appealing, fun experience. And I think a lot of that I attribute to my mom. And for me, trying to make healthy eating a cool thing.
That's great. That's great. Like, how strict are you with, for example, is this like based on keto or any kind of other like type diet you that are kind of like in vogue now, or is it more based on like pretty balanced approach?
So I always hated the word diet, in because of the diet culture, and you hear just so many, and especially when they were pitching the book and things like that, and the way that they wanted to hit the diet market, and I kept fighting and saying, this is not a diet book. This is a recipe book, and you get my workout plan in there too, because I believe in making fitness accessible to people anywhere, anytime workouts. And so for me, what changed me, and the way that I started eating, was starting to look at the work of Dr. Mark Hyman, and he's a functional medicine doctor. And I was reading his research, and I said, I'm going to try one of these plans that he has, because he kept talking about, are you getting brain fog, are you getting, tired and wanting to nap? And I said, let me do the test. And I do my own tests before I even talk about it on my platforms or talk about it to clients or anyone, because I want that firsthand experience. And I started doing at that point keto is out, however, using my own common sense. Like, just because it tells you you can eat a shit ton of bacon doesn't mean that I was going to eat so much bacon. It wasn't about that. But I started taking out refined sugar. I limited my sugar intake to 25 grams. I did not know how much sugar I was consuming, because I said, I don't eat candy. I don't do, and then I was adding it up and I was like, oh my God, all of this is sugar. And I did that for 21 days. And when I did that, I had energy like no other. My skin, which struggled with acne and things like that, changed like no other, and like just so many differences in my hair and my energy and my feels. And then I created my own rendition of that, which I do 90-10. I'm not trying to get into ketosis. I like my tequila on the weekends, here and there. And I do like some of my, like yesterday, I had a meeting and I indulged in a big pizza and a big glass of tequila. And I don't regret it at all. So finding that balance. But the one thing that I've stayed very strict with, especially because of all of the research behind it, is my sugar intake. I don't eat more than 25 grams of sugar.
Sugars, and I'm like, I don't want to give US some extra crap, but the food in the US, like when I lived in the States, the food is so bad overall. Like the stuff you buy in the regular supermarket, there are obviously specialist stores that are a bit more, organic and stuff like that, which costs a lot of money. But the general food that people eat is so packed with sugar, like processed
Yeah,
crap pretty much, that we put in our body that doesn't do anything good. Like it's better to just fast if you can.
absolutely.
So the food culture is a problem. And do you see that's like, do you see any kind of trend shift in that, or do you think like it's just still the same?
Um, I think it's still the same. I think the difference that I am seeing now is that people are more aware and are able to make better choices for themselves. You can't rely on the food system, especially out here, to look out for you. You have to be your own advocate and you have to do your own research. And the one thing that I have learned throughout this all is you have to be your own doctor, in the sense of what works for you might not work for someone else. And what they're advising might not work for you. And finding that happy medium of what is, based on research, common sense, and what works for you. So that's a very important thing. I was just in Germany in, when was I there? I was in Germany in May, and I was eating. Don't ask me to pronounce any of the stuff that I was eating, and I will tell you, I didn't have any bloating issues. I didn't have any of the issues that if I had those foods here in LA, like, it would be a different story in the States, not just LA.
Yeah,
And
no, it seems like it's like almost from the crop, right? Like it's so badly processed from the ground. Like, so this, what I've read, like, is that the soil is so nutrition deficient, right? So there's no nutrition in the soil anymore, and then obviously there's like companies want to make money, so they will
sure,
sprinkle whatever.
absolutely. And I think a lot of people will just trust the label, the box, and I'm like, that is
No
not,
added sugar.
no added sugar, but please turn it around. I will not forget this, and I wish I wish I had my phone on record. I was on the phone with my friend, who, she was super happy to FaceTime me because she doesn't eat vegetables or drink any green juice or whatever, and she calls me, and I could see the brand, and I don't want to say the brand, but I could see the brand. She was like, "Look, Sarah, I'm doing you proud. I'm having a green juice." And I said, turned around the bottle, and I predicted it. I guesstimated. I was like, I bet you that has 50 grams of sugar. and she turns around and it had 56 grams of sugar. And she was like, this whole time I thought I was doing something good and having something healthy. And I said, you were drinking a soda disguised as a juice, as a green juice. And that's what's so sad. And that's the one thing that I try to articulate as good as I can, to say, don't trust because it says healthy or no sugar added. I said, turn around, you have to read it, unfortunately. It's like reading the small print, the fine print. And it's sad because a lot of people are not taught that. And I had to do my research and understand it. And then once I made those changes, I saw not only the difference in my body, but again, on my insides. The healthiest I feel now than I did when I was a 16-year-old elite athlete.
Yeah, and kids also, like generally when you're a teenager, even if someone can give you recommendations, and I think, going back even 10, 15 years, like we were not half as far as we are understanding at least what we put into our body, and I think today tennis players can make more educated choices in what, like, okay, shouldn't drink sugary beverages, I should avoid like quite fatty foods before a match, for example. But
Yes.
if you go back, years, it was completely different landscape.
Absolutely. And I think you have to, again, you have to be your own advocate. You can't rely on either your team, who's probably not educated in this because they picked up the sport. A lot of them have picked up the sport, or unless you've hired a nutritionist or you've hired a dietitian or you've hired a chef or whatever that knows these kinds of things, like you have to do it. You have to just do it. And it's so sad that it has to be that way. And some of these places that are classified as health stores out here. I recently was having a conversation with my friend. Again, I don't want to say the place, but she was like, "Oh, I go here because it's so healthy." And I was like, "That is one of I had to do a video on it because I was like, it was one of the most difficult places for me to find healthy foods in this self-proclaimed health food store, because you just turn it around. If you can't pronounce the ingredients, you most likely shouldn't be having it. And if it has more than like 5 ingredients and you can't recognize them, you most likely should not be having it. And if it has a shelf life of God knows how long, you definitely should not be having it. So that's my little rule of thumb.
I think it's a good rule of thumb, and I think like reading labels has become quite popular. Like you actually want to check what is going on here. What is this acid they put in this normal thing that you're buying, and I guess also like eating whole fruits instead of like juice stuff where you don't know what they put in, and eating,
Absolutely.
yeah, vegetables and then stuff like that. But yeah, so the food, you're really into and you eat really healthy. So from like a Middle Eastern standpoint, like you use a lot of spices, right? That's
Oh,
their
yeah.
magic.
That is the magic. And the way that I do it is, especially if I am hosting, my advice that I give, because in a lot of the Middle Eastern culture, there's so much starchiness on the table. Like they'll make a sandwich, which is bread with rice, with chickpeas, which is like beans, potatoes, like French fries, and then add your protein and some whatever. But you don't need all that. You don't need all that. So I always pick one starchy carb for the table, and then everything else is healthy fats, proteins, and non-refined non-starchy carbs. So that's how I do it. And that's why, one, you'll feel amazing afterwards, even though you're eating like so much food. You're getting fuller quicker and you're not feeling stuffed. And then when it comes to alcohol, especially if I'm hosting, I'll make a cocktail with no refined sugar. I'll use monk fruit, and I have secret concoctions of making stuff taste good. But I'm also a tequila neat girl, so most of my girlfriends don't have that. So if the girlfriends are here, I'm doing tequila. I'm doing like a cocktail. But if I'm out somewhere, I'm doing a tequila neat, and it's just pure tequila.
Is tequila better than wine, for example? Because now I feel like a glass of wine, but I'm thinking like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's too much sugar in the wine.
It's not just that. A lot of the wine companies are not very much regulated in the sense of they can add so much to it. Even though you're thinking you're having like organic wines, I don't know so much of how it is in other countries, but out here, that's more so of what it's like. And if you notice, you'll get what's called a wine headache. Even if you're drinking a more higher priced wine, you'll still get that. And I had to start doing research on that and figure it out. I was like, this is an expensive bottle of wine. Why do I still feel like crap? And don't get me wrong, I do love my occasional Sauvignon Blanc or whatever, but I stick to tequila. It's tequila or gin.
Now I
That's
feel like a tequila. There's some really cool tequila bars in Malta where I used to live. So now I'm like, it would be nice because I'm going back in a few weeks. So now I feel like
very cool.
tequila bars. Yeah, it's actually cool. No, so that's great. I mean, like avoiding the sugar is key, of course. But
Yeah.
now you have a better diet. You're back on the tennis court. How does your body feel in general? Like, do you take extra care now with like stretching, warm up, than you
Oh yeah,
compared to what you did when you were actually competing as a teenager?
absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the times growing up as an athlete, you think you're invincible and you think, oh, that's not going to happen to me. You hear about the injuries all the time and you're like, no, I'm so strong. It's not going to happen to me. And until it does. And then if you allow it, it teaches you the biggest lesson of your life of one, you're not invincible. Like anything can happen at any given point. And studying kinesiology, really understanding the importance of what you do off the court and your recovery is so much more important than your actual training. And now I'm in acupuncture once a week. I have my twice a month massage where I'm like, this is not a luxury thing anymore. Like yesterday, if we did this podcast yesterday, I was a crippled person because I went back to back 3 days in a row of 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and my body was done because I've been playing against a lot of the guys, and so they still have the mindset of, oh, I don't want a girl to beat me. You would think we would be past that by now, so
Yeah,
they try to like work me harder, but yeah. So for me, the importance of that recovery was key because I was my energy was low. I had a headache from my traps being so tight from serving and obviously just pounding the ball in the court and seeing how good I feel today. Like I'm a different person today and I can get back onto the court right now where before I was like dragging myself. I didn't do the extras. I never did the massages. I never did the acupuncture, the stretching. Oh God, like they would be like, "Did you stretch?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah." It was like 2 seconds, like the basic. Now, my entire morning ritual like consists of full blown stretching, midday stretching, evening before going to bed stretching, Epsom salt bath almost every single night.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, so I would say much better now.
No, I think it's interesting. Like I try to stretch. I was the same. Like I didn't ever stretch. Now I play like 2 hours almost every day. So my body is also like, hello, take it easy, man. I
Yeah.
went to a podiatrist to get like custom insoles to just really have like no knee problems or at least from that. Like because I test shoes as well. So everything you can take more seriously, the better. And today I was on the court and there were some juniors and they were all doing like a lot of resistance bands,
Yeah.
which going back, people weren't doing a lot of resistance bands or just like they were like, okay, go on the court.
Stretching was back then. I think a lot of people just understanding, especially now more education and more people realizing tennis is not a static sport. So you should be doing dynamic warm ups and customizing strictly for your sport and the type of athlete that you are and the movements that you're doing and getting that blood flowing and wearing the right shoes, wearing the right socks down to the socks. Like I recently had a sock issue and I was like, what the hell? Like I now have to pay attention all the way to my socks, like because I'm so in tune with my body. Where back then I was not. I would play through pain and I was like, oh, this is normal. It's supposed to be painful to be an athlete. Like that was it. And now it feels good to be an athlete.
That's great. I mean, like I think that's true. I think people think there's pride in the pain, which there is in a way that you are actually using your body because it's much better than sitting down all the time and just being completely lethargic. But
Yeah.
there's no real greatness in having a lot of pain. So you can obviously, adjust the pain. But I think people still have that old school mindset, Do you do any ice baths and stuff like that?
Okay. So when I got back into tennis, I dealt with a ongoing calf strain. And if anyone out there has had a calf strain, it is no joke. It is no joke. A calf strain, and once you have that calf strain or a hamstring strain, those are very similar in injury. It's a reoccurring injury, and one side will compensate, and then the other one will have it, and it goes back and forth. So me growing up with the mindset in college and learning my education through that was the rice mentality, which was ice was a part of it. And until I went to the acupuncturist, and then I went to a sports specific doctor, and they were like, there's been recent studies, no more ice, it's now about heat. And so it's more so getting that blood flowing, because the ice is going to restrict that flowing from happening. It's going to restrict from that blood properly getting to where it needs to get to. And so what I was explained and what I was taught was, if it's within the first day, you ice it. If that pain, because you're trying to control the pain, not so much treat it, it's for pain control. So I don't really do the ice baths anymore. And in college, I did an ice bath because I only played, I only was on that team for a year. And it was like, I was the freshman. So it's like, I'm going to be the tough one. I'm going to be this tough, I'm going to push through it. And I did it, and it was brutal. And it's still brutal. I do ice, like, not ice, but like a cold shower right afterwards or whatever at the ending, but not so much of the ice bath. So, no. I've done cryotherapy. It felt fun. I don't know if there is enough adequate research behind it, because, again, everyone has their own research. Everyone does their own research, and there's so many different mixed studies. But I do believe in the sauna. I was in that sauna yesterday for 15 minutes, and I'm a heat person. I love the heat, so I could do a sauna.
Yeah, same here. I really love the heat a lot more. That's why I always move to hotter countries. But it's like the heat for me works better than the ice. Being Swedish originally, it's like I want to avoid that. But what I've noticed myself is that sometimes after like 2 hours of tennis, it's nice to do like ice bath, like quick one, then in the sauna, then back to the ice, then in the sauna, and that really makes you feel amazing afterwards. Like you do that maybe 3-4 times, that kind of cycle.
Yeah,
Uh,
those kinds of cycles, I know a lot of people that do them and that they feel good. I've done it, and it's just, I think at that point of what's working for you and what's not, and for me, just give me a sauna.
Saunas are good. Like, is it easy to find saunas like in LA maybe, but in the States?
Oh yeah, we have so many. It's become like the wellness community here has become such an on-trend thing. It's it's almost so funny because it's become such an Instagram thing, but for me it's like, this is what I do to to feel good in general, not just post about it. So you could always see the difference in that.
Yeah, it's kind of like an influencer city now, like LA. I mean, it was always about that, but in
Yeah.
different forms. I went to shoot commercials for the company, and like for a company I worked for many years, like 5-6 years ago, and then that was before the pandemic and everything. And I love many parts of LA. It's the traffic I didn't love so much,
Oh.
uh, but it's a fun city. Like, how do you find living there? How long have you stayed in LA now?
My whole life, pretty much. We moved here right after the well, during, not right after the Civil War. And so I've been here since I was a baby, basically. So for me, I've known LA, but I love to travel, and there are parts of things LA that I absolutely love, and parts like the traffic and some of the some of the other stuff where it's just like, oh my God, this is why LA has that rap, right? But there's good in wherever you find, wherever you are. There's always good and there's always bad. So,
How's the tennis scene? Is it a lot of players and stuff like
oh
that?
my God, tennis. I feel in the States, California, Florida, Texas are your top areas for tennis, and that's how you know what level you are at. being a top player in California because the competition was so high. And now getting back into the scene, a lot has not changed since leaving it and throwing away the racket. And it's been, I threw it away for like 12 years and then picked it up because I was going through a very difficult time with my uh, cousin battling cancer, and my anxiety had come back. And we were very close in age. So me being here and then watching me being healthy and then watching her just deteriorate right in front of me, I got back the anxiety, even though I was doing the journaling, the meditation, the breath work, but there was something I needed, that release. And with tennis, you release so much. It's like another version of boxing, in my opinion. If you're an aggressive player, which I am, uh, it releases a lot of anxiety if you're coming in with a different mindset. And a lot of people don't talk about the fact that cancer not only changes the person who has it, but changes the people around them who love them, if you allow it to change you for the better. And for me, I utilize it in the sense of, I'm grateful to God I'm healthy, and I had to make a lot of sense for myself, because you can't make sense of a situation like that. There is nothing anyone can say or do to tell you any differently in regards to when someone is diagnosed with such a nasty disease. And so when she passed, it really affected my mental like no other. I couldn't, my creativity vanished. I couldn't understand what I was going to do. And everything that I was doing, the therapy, the breath work, and I said, what is missing? And I decided to pick up my racket after 12 years. Like, I hadn't picked up my racket, and I said, I'm gonna find a place to go, and I'm gonna go and play. And I hit the ball and I started playing, and it was like picking up where I left off, in the sense of like my form was there, my footwork was there. I was tired, don't get me wrong, I was exhausted. However, I ended up crying on the court because I was able to release. And I said, what was this? This is what I needed. This sport sent me to anxiety and depression, and now it's my outlet for it. So just having that full circle moment and appreciation of the sport is just such a beautiful thing. And I ended up going to support this league that's out here, called the Oyster Tennis Club, and it's usually guys that play, and I'm always the only female, because I don't know where my female players are. And I went. It was during the Indian Wells Open, and he invited me to the tournament to play. But I was like, I got myself out of it. I was like, I'm not gonna play. I have not played in how long? No way. Like, I'm here to support, and then I'm gonna go watch the pros at Indian Wells. And I came on and to the court, and I was like, okay, well, it's good seeing you. And he was like, you're playing in the tournament. And I was like, no, no, I'm not. And I like half-assed, like, okay, I'm gonna put my name down. And I was walking away, and then they called me. The director like called me, and I was like, I'll have to play now. And so I played doubles, and I unconventionally won the entire thing, and I got a little medal and everything with it, and it just ignited a spark in me, because as an athlete, those trophies in a sense signified a lot of meaning. It wasn't just a plastic thing, and usually there were ugly trophies. It wasn't just this plastic object. It was a showcase of your hard work. And so when, after all these years receiving it, I felt like a kid again. I was like, oh my God. I have all my trophies, and I threw them in boxes. I was like, I don't care about this crap. And here I am caring about this, because I said, wow, this is a full circle moment for me, because it showed me, wow, the sport that traumatized me in a sense, now I came back and conquered it in a different way. And I think that's what ignited me to start playing again. And I'm grateful. I definitely am, to be back on the court and to be a better player now.
That's a great story. And I also like a beautiful way of putting tennis, because tennis can really drive you crazy in many ways. It can drive your whole family crazy as well, and it can be like a thing that brings a lot of pain. Like a lot of players talk about, not being happy on the court, and that could be like ex pros. It could be juniors that had their parents, force them to play tennis. I've sometimes played with like a 16-year-old, top five player in Europe,
Yeah.
a 15-year-old girl, and she doesn't seem happy, and I'm asking her afterwards, like, oh, after we played, and she's like, oh, my parents are forcing me. It's not
Mhm.
her love for the sport, but when you get a little bit older, a bit more mature, and then you can understand, you have like your own relationship with the sport. It's not a forced one, it's like more of a natural, organic one that you want.
Absolutely. I think in a sense, I'm grateful I got injured, and I know it sounds so crazy. It pivoted me in a direction that I would have never imagined, and I most likely wouldn't have been taking the lead in my life the way that I am now had I continued the path of what my father wanted. And I probably would have, made it pro and then thrown my racket at some point, in the sense that said I'm done with. And you hear a lot of athletes now. A lot of tennis players talk about it. I was just watching recently the Marty Fish. Uh,
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
so I was crying through it because I understood so much of it and so much relatability. And watching the Naomi Osaka, and just the way that she's been standing up in a lot of different ways and advocating on the mental health aspect for athletes. And again, I will say it over and over, and I've said it twice already, that tennis is the only individual sport that you advocate for yourself on that court. You're by yourself. You don't have your team. So if you're playing basketball, you have your teammates. If you're having a crappy time, your teammates are, pushing you and helping you and whatever it is. But on the tennis court, you have to figure it out, which I feel is the reason why there's so much mental health issues going on. And tennis is a particular type of sport where they don't talk about a lot of these things because you're not supposed to. So I like that a lot of players right now are being more vocal and being more vulnerable and standing up for themselves and talking about the things that matter, because in a sense you're not going to be a tennis player forever. So what are you going to leave behind for the other players? And you have to stand up in some sort of another, because not a lot of people have this inner strength to be able to push through these kinds of things. And it can be a very dark and sad world. I mean, again, watching that Marty Fish episode of it was very spot on.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's like you get the release from sweating. That's why, like, I'm addicted to it as well. Like, you get that release, like, because when you play tennis, you can't think about anything else,
Yeah.
really, like, technically. But when you're a pro, or you're someone is pushing you to become like a good player, or it's like results driven, whether it's from you or from someone else, then you feel very lonely usually. Like, it can be a very tough one, and it's also a very costly sport, so there's also that element. Like, it's very tough to make it, and even
Yeah.
if you're like top 200 in the world, it's maybe not enough to make a living from it, which is a bit crazy compared to other sports where you have, millions and millions made from being that kind of level in your sport.
Absolutely. I think another player that is really doing well with this is Novak, in the sense of he's doing the mental stuff. He talks about the mental stuff like no other. I heard him on a podcast, and he was talking about the meditation and the self work and the mental work that he has been doing and has been doing all these years. And it's so nice to hear those kinds of things, because when you see a lot of stuff where you see the highlight reels and whatever, you see just the training aspect. You see them like grinding on the court, and you're like, oh, that's all that it takes. And it's like, no, it is not that. That is not it. That is not it at all. So I think it's great that a lot of players are taking that route of things and actually utilizing their platforms and going on platforms to talk about it, because it's so important. I didn't have that growing up. I didn't see that. It was just play on the court. Play, that's it.
Yeah,
Hours and hours and hours.
play and win, right? Yeah, so the anxiety is a big thing in tennis, and I think a lot of players struggle with anxiety. Yeah, how's your relationship with your father today? Like, is it was it tough, obviously, being trained by him, but are you fine today, or was it like created a problem?
Of course. I mean, in the sense of it, you know, getting cut off at that early age and really becoming self sufficient just makes you feel a little more powerful in this sense. And to be like, okay, well, let me show you how I'm going to now do things. So it's that kind of a relationship of like, okay, I'm my own person. I run my own life. I do my own things. And I'm just honestly very, very proud of being able to take a tough situation and becoming an even tougher person. So, but still a softie because I think you have to be really strong in order to be soft at the same time. So, to be able to acknowledge your softness, I think it just adds this humanly component that a lot of people, when they grow up in these kinds of situations, they just become like a frozen soldier. And that is not me at all, at all. If any of my friends know, I am very, very smiley.
But that's great. I mean, I think it's one of the important aspects of being a human is to show vulnerability uh, amongst your strengths. So, like, we're all three-dimensional beings, right? So we need to have both to exist in the world. It's tough enough being alive, right? So
Oh
having that
yeah,
like ability to be a warrior, but also showing that you're also human, I think is important.
absolutely. And I think as an athlete, especially when you're training to be pro or you are a pro, you're not allowed to show the vulnerability side. So I think that's also what happens to a lot of athletes in the sense no emotions, can't show anybody what you're feeling, can't talk about it, can't do any of that. And because you're doing that on a repetitive basis over and over and over, a lot of athletes become that person, period. And I don't know, I think being able to show some emotion, I think is healthy and I think is totally fine as long as you don't let your emotions get the best of you. I think I mean, I'm not saying go and slam your racket, but it's normal and it's okay to do so. And I've broken my fair share of rackets in the past. Like, let me tell you, I used to have a temper at some point on the court, but I I think just doing a lot of that self work allows you to be able to handle situations, especially when you take it into the real world. You're going to have shitty people all day telling you what you can and cannot do, and most of the time you can't do things or are not doing things right or they don't like how you're doing it. And you are going to have some emotions, but learning how to control it, I think it makes you not only a better athlete but a better person and live a happier life.
Yeah, no, and also like yes, using what you learn from tennis or whatever your hobby is or sport, like what you talked about in the beginning, is so important that you're kind of it's like a microcosm of your life, right? So like if you're learning how to deal with issues there and you learned early with all your injury and that stuff, and then you can use that as a strength in your life to develop and do stuff. So what do you see ahead of yourself now? Like you're in tennis, you have business going, you're doing consulting, do you have more books in the works? What are you working on right now?
I have been getting ready to eventually launch on my website my next set of programs for anywhere, anytime workouts, as well as a meal prep course because I get asked for my recipes all the time and I want to be able to teach people how to do this from their own kitchen. And I also do have I can't go fully about it, but I'm very, very excited because I am going to be conquering the tennis world in the business aspect with a product that my business partner and I have been creating for the last 2 years. And I'm so excited for it to come out, yeah, hopefully in December, maybe even sooner, but in December. And once it's out, then I get to share it and maybe I get to come back here to share it with everyone. But we're taking my experience of what I learned in the tennis and now making a pathway for other athletes to learn from what I did and without me saying exactly what it is and what we're doing. But I'm very excited for that aspect because, you know, I always thought tennis was my life and tennis is my life and this is what I'm destined to do. So when I lost it, I lost myself. And now to come back in a full circle moment that, you know, I get to come back in a different manner. I get to come back as a smarter athlete, a more in tune athlete, and be able to utilize those skills to help other athletes. And you see so many of the tennis brands doing the come up, and different companies doing a come up right now because tennis became such a huge thing these last 2 years, which is about damn time. But it's nice to now have someone that's actually in tennis as a former player to come in and, with my eyes and my partner's eyes, to be able to give it a new look. Is all I can say. Just give it a little new look from an athlete, from a former tennis player's point of view. And my partner is my best friend since we were 13 years old, and we have been friends all of these years, and like sisters. And she grew up playing tennis, but she went on the recreational side and coaching and things like that. And then due to some health issues, she switched over to pickleball. So we'll be conquering tennis on my end and pickleball on her end, and I'm very excited for it. So to just come back with a new perspective, the experience, and this confidence of that pivot shifted me into this new path, and I'm very excited. That's it. I'm very excited.
Sounds exciting. Sounds it's always fun. Like now, I think when you have the tools, like partly in the digital world, like you can create, like you made your book, you pushed it forward. You can have like you can build a whole business from a computer pretty much today if you have the mindset and the skills, obviously. But it's something you can learn. So this sounds very exciting. I think it's you're always welcome back to talk about it when it's ready for launch.
Yes, send you a PR package.
Yeah.
We're gonna make the tennis nerd edition.
Yeah, exactly. That is always good. I'm very excited about getting recipes. I'm really like into eating healthy as well, now nutritious, and I also have cheat stuff, and like, okay, I'm gonna have a beer or whatever. You never really feel good like after beer because it's like all the gluten and stuff, I guess. But you have to treat yourself. You have to balance it, right? So, but it would be nice to have some kind of Middle Eastern influence, like with more spices and stuff, and how to work with that. That would really be cool for me. Like that's what I'm from a purely selfish point of view, right?
I think that is just a great point. And you use the word cheat, and I always tell people, don't say cheat, just say indulge. You indulge in it, because a lot of the times, especially growing up, you start to have super negative connotations with food. And I like to just take out a word like that and just say, I indulged. I indulged in my tequila yesterday. Did not care. At the moment, I felt great. this early morning, give or take, like the pizza and the extras that I didn't have to have the extra dessert, but I did. I think learning how to just say, we're gonna indulge, and then we're gonna learn how to balance it out in the sense of, like, you can't out balance a bad diet in general, but however you can do some things to kind of like reset. And I am going to be relaunching my YouTube channel because I deleted everything. I had no idea what I was doing in the beginning, but I want to make it more tennis specific, in the sense of being able to create more nutritious meals for after your 3 hours on the court, and what you should have before in order to have sustained energy and good quality foods to last you during a long match. So I'm going to make sure to be able to do that on my own platform that I have on socials, such as Instagram, TikTok, and now Threads. Threads is a thing now. I do my tennis Tuesdays. So slowly getting into the swing of things with more of my tennis content. And probably going to annoy a lot of people who are used to seeing more gym content, but tennis is a much more fun workout for me than a traditional gym. And I think a lot of people don't understand, like, you don't need to do crazy workouts in order to really benefit yourself, as far as like strength training and things like that. Like I've seen some of the craziest workouts and some of the craziest things being said, like, do this workout every single day, this one exercise every single day, and you are going to have a snatched butt and a snatched waist. And I'm like, this is so wrong. And I just, I don't understand it. Like, I never like false information like that, because I understand what they're doing. And just people make it so much about money and sales and numbers. And it's so exhausting that I think it's more refreshing to show, if you do these basic exercises and just start playing with the number of reps, playing with how heavy you're going, and playing with the sequence and whatever, that's an actual great workout. Like, you don't have to do a somersault into a backflip into a squat, like some of the weirdest things I've seen. So I'm hoping like more people will see that, and I'm hoping that I can also at the same time like show tennis specific workouts. So
That's great. I think, yeah, I think there's the TikTok situation where you have like people, they do whatever to get some
huge,
eyeballs, you know. So
huge.
and they lead a lot of people. I mean, you have youngsters, kids watching it, and they, oh, is this how you get like a six pack? And then it's like
Yeah,
complete bullshit, right? So, yeah, that's a little bit of the problem. Like people don't know what source to go for, and everybody is just obsessed with how many likes and views they can get. So I think that's a big problem, to get it
yeah.
like the right
I'm
information.
very rebellious in the sense of I could give a shit less to ever go viral. I could care less if it hit millions of views. I care more so of the people that write me and say, "Hey, I was able to do this workout. Never thought that I could do this with 3 kids and a full time job. And thank you for having your workouts, because I lose the excuse of getting in an actual workout, and that to me is way more important than going viral or going and you know uh, having millions and millions of followers. Like, I'm okay with just taking the longer route and not doing those kinds of clickbait type of things, and it's more authentic, I feel. And it feels so much better and more satisfying, because I can only imagine. I mean, when I first started off in social media, I'm not going to lie, I was first one of the ones that, back before everybody was talking on camera, but they would do like the cheesy things of like making a shake and then like shaking the shake, like smoothing and whatever, but in like a very cheesy manner. And I look at that and I cringe because I was like, I was one of those people in the beginning, and that didn't last long. That lasted maybe 2 weeks, and then I deleted it and I said, please get back to your own content. Like, what are you doing? Just what are you doing? It's a lot of self talk, and I attribute that again to tennis. You have a lot of self talk there. My
Yeah,
neighbors
yeah.
probably think I have a roommate or something, because the amount of conversations I'm having with myself. Because of tennis, you're talking to yourself on the court. Most of those players are talking to themselves. But yeah, so I'm just very excited, and I'm now been inspiring my followers to pick up tennis, and that's just so nice. They always ask me if I teach. I do not. I am not into coaching at all. It's a lot more difficult than what people think.
Yeah, of
And they'll
course.
ask me all the time. They're like, "Do you want to teach?" I was like, "No." They're
It's a
like, "But you teach exercise," and I was like, "That's different." There is a disconnect with me and exercise, in the sense of I wasn't a professional lifter or whatever, but being a former aspiring pro, it's a way different mindset to take the route of coaching. And I hope coaches now are doing better in the sense of educating themselves and really working on the mental aspect of how to connect with an athlete, and how to also treat an athlete more like a human than a machine. I think a lot of coaches, they make you feel like you have to be a machine, and I hope that now it's better. I don't know so much for me. Like, I'm playing on my own. I hired a coach last week to work on my serve. So I was like, I need to figure out what is going on this serve, because even though I'm taping it to like taping it, even though I'm recording it and like trying to understand and fix it, it's always better when you have a second set of eyes to be able to tell you, hey, this is what's going on, why don't you shift this. And I made a little change that I would have never thought of to do so myself, but it was nice to have a coach that was a little softer.
Yeah, you're not used to that, I guess. Like, I mean, I
No.
think it's a lot about personality, also the chemistry now. Like some people just need a coach to listen to them, like when even when they're whining about something, because a lot of players whine, of course. Uh, or some people maybe want someone to be a bit more firm and be like, hey, you have to tell me when I'm, doing this because it's wrong or whatever. I think it's a
Yeah.
little bit different. But I think also for the coaches sometimes can be a bit afraid to say what they want because they're gonna get fired or it's gonna be lead to a problem, right?
Yeah, I think to really, how can I say it? I think for people to really, if you have the opportunity to pick a coach that you connect with, as opposed to what you feel that they can just teach you on the court, I think a lot of that is so important. And I think that's what makes an athlete more human, is a great coach like that. And it's so, so important. Your team for that makes a huge, huge impact on and off the court. And I think the off court, especially, just having that recovery time and having someone who cares about that and says, hey, did you do your stretch? Did you have a great protein? Did you have enough protein after your workout? Like, those are so important. A lot of athletes won't do that. And I think a lot of coaches will neglect that aspect of it. But I feel like a lot goes behind just being on the tennis court, beating balls, and talking strategy. There's so much more, especially for such a mental sport like tennis.
Yeah, I think now the teams, what has changed, what I see when I travel around to the tournaments is that the teams are much bigger. Like, so for example, back then you used to be like, hey, I can ask this player and maybe she or he has tickets. But now they have like a whole entourage of like, they have a physio, they have like a trainer, like a hitting partner, they have the coach, they could have a nutritionist. I mean, Novak is very good at this. He has a whole team. He has probably like a cryo chamber outside in a some kind of bus or something.
I
Uh,
wouldn't be surprised. Well, I loved watching. I think the second season of Breakpoint was a little better in the
much better,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah, of course, anyone that's in the tennis world is going to be quite critical of the sport, as most tennis players are. But watching Iga and her team, I think that was, I mean, when she put on the things for the mental, and like me knowing what the purpose of that was, but really showing like, let me show you what is going on behind the scenes. Like, so I know a lot of tennis players, were quite critical about the break point, excuse me. And I feel that really showing that aspect of players, that behind the scenes and what goes on, and what you have to do on the mental side of things to prep you to get onto the court. I think that was such a great showcase of what really goes on. I mean, yes, again, it just, a lot of it was at surface level that they touch, because of course there's so much. And I understand how these kinds of shows work, and they love to create more and more drama and more things like that. I get it. But for me, I think it was a good start, and I hope more shows like that come to surface, and more people cover things like that, and to really talk about those kinds of things. Because what do you do when the career is over?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a very good point you raised there because I think from what I talked to in Spain, in Marbella, where I live, like it's a little bit like LA in Southern Europe, right? So it's like a lot of like nice villas and rich people, and it's a little bit more quiet than LA, but also a lot of former tennis players. Like Novak lives here, so his house is not that far from here, and when you meet them, and it's like a lot of them had mental issues after leaving tennis because it's also what am I doing now? Like I was 150 in the world, it made me some money. It didn't made me like enough money to just go and in the sunset and be happy.
Yeah.
I need to do some work. And like maybe they're 33, they don't have a college education, so they unless maybe they went through American tennis college, which is great, I think. But then you're like, what am I doing? Like I'm gonna be a coach now for stand on the
Yeah.
court, 8 hours a day. That's not really viable, maybe for some. So it leads to mental health situations where not like so good, I think.
Absolutely. I think in a lot of sports, I think even in the sports like basketball or football, even though they have made millions and millions of dollars, because they're more likely to do so.
even if they're like a fourth round pick, fifth round pick, or whatever. I think athletes in general, it's a very short-lived career. It's a very, very short-lived career, and that's all you knew your pretty much your entire life. If you've gone pro, you've been doing this since you were kids, so you've identified yourself with that sport. So once that sport is gone, what do you do? And unless you've set it up for yourself and you've really done the inner work and the self work to really figure out, hey, this is the sport and then this is me. It is not one or the other, but most of the cases that's not that. And that's why you'll see the athletes like letting themselves go in the sense of no more working out, no more eating healthy, and you'll see a different athlete. You won't even see it. And it's not so much about, hey, do it because you have to do it because you have to look a certain way. No, it's not about that. It's working out releases endorphins, eating the right foods releases great hormones, the important hormones. And if you're all of a sudden throwing in the towel with working out or whatever it is that you were doing and then eating like crap, that is linked to depression and anxiety and all of those kinds of things. And I think if people talked about it more or showcased that more of like what to do to help you and provide more resources, what to do after being an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, there could even be some kind of pension, obviously, from the ATP. I think there are in some cases, but maybe not so like far-reaching. Like it's only for like certain top players. But also, like, is there like a post-tennis program? Like, can you educate yourself? Can they support you? The tennis organizations, there are quite a few of them. It should be something because I have friends that ballooned in weight and are drinking or whatever. They ended up in a bad spot after professional tennis. Some friends went into kind of more like bit spiritual magic mushrooms and all that, like sitting on a mountain because they feel like tennis was rough.
Yeah.
I talked to them, like I met one guy today. So, and he's like, I used to travel all over the world. I never saw anything now. So he wants to travel now because it's like what he saw was hotel, tennis court, gym. That was pretty much it.
It's crazy because a lot of people think like if you are traveling all over for your career, your vacation and whatever. And a few years back, I was traveling with a client of mine who is a singer, and I was traveling across the United States on a tour bus, city
Was
to
this J
city.
Lo, by the way?
Oh my God, no, I wish. I wish. I mean, he's had a song with J-Lo, so it's kind of like in the same, what is it? What's that term? I forgot what that term is. 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah. Okay.
So in a sense it was. And people were like, oh, you've been here, here, here. And I was like, I was asleep on the tour bus. So I think it's a very similar lifestyle that I lived. If I was a professional tennis player, that would have been that lifestyle. And it's, you don't see anything. You're on a tour, you're in your bubble. And so in a sense, I'm glad I also went through that of being on tour with the artist, because it was even more so of like me saying I wouldn't have probably been happy playing on tour unless, again, I had my surrounding team and I was able to have that control and whatever. Then it's a different story, of course. But yeah, but that story of me getting that artist as a client is very interesting. And again, I do attribute that to tennis because when I was first referred to the job, it was 5 days before having to leave on tour, like pack everything before going on tour for 5 weeks. So 5 days before for 5 weeks. And he, at that time, was training for the New York Marathon. And I do have a sports background. I've worked with football, American football. I've worked with tennis, obviously, volleyball and basketball, but never with runners. And so his manager asked me, she said, have you ever trained a marathon player before? And I lied and I said, yes, I have. And she was like, so you're not only going to be training him for the tour, but you're also going to be training him for the New York Marathon. And I said, perfect. When do I leave? And she goes, in 5 days. And so I got off the phone call and I called a top running marathon coach and asked him for his playbook, basically. Learned everything through him, hired him to teach me everything that he knew. I had him like on text in case I had any questions, or I also have common sense and I have the knowledge with my sports background and certifications and degree to be able to train and properly for a form. But I knew that opportunity was only going to come once, so I knew because of my tennis background that I am resourceful and can figure it out. And I figured it out, and they had no idea that whole time that was my first time working with a marathon coach. It wasn't anything to put someone in danger because, again, my background. But that was thanks to tennis, figuring that out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's about figuring it out. Like, yeah, sometimes you have to be like taking a bit of a route to just be in a place where you can actually learn that stuff and work it out. There's always solutions to everything, right? But
Of course.
you seem quite resourceful, but it's a good skill to have in life, I think.
Yeah. Thanks to sport.
Well,
Figuring it out.
Sarah, I've been taking a lot of your time and a lot of your dog's time because I think she wants to go for a walk with all these fire alarms going on. But it's been great, fire alarms permitting, to talk to you, and really enjoyed it, learned a lot. And whenever you want to come on again and talk about your new products or new life in tennis or whatever's happening, you're very, very welcome. So that will be cool.
I'm excited. Maybe I'll compete again and invite you for my tournament. We'll see.
I would love to come. I've been living in a suitcase myself. It's been like Paris twice and now Stuttgart, Mallorca, Sweden, and I'm going somewhere else. Yeah, so it's been like that a little bit. But then I see the hotel, I see the venue for the players, and that's pretty much it. But it's okay.
I totally get it, but I'm very excited. I'm super, super grateful for you having me here. This is, again, I'm a big fan of the podcast. I listen to it on my morning walks, so it's always great to hear this input of hearing people who passionately love the sport, and again, not having that growing up and now hearing that coming back into the sport. It's just such a great nostalgia feeling. So until next time.
Great. That's poetry to my ears. And it's also a beautiful community of tennis. And I think that's one of the best things about, I mean, sport in general, but I think the tennis community is kind of giving and caring and is a pretty good place to hang out.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.